it's a cold and rainy day in North Carolina today as the Falcons head up there to take on the Carolina Panthers for the second time this season. And it's been a long time since these two saw each other, way back in week 1. So much has changed since then, especially for this Carolina Panthers team. But one thing that we know is the more things change for this Panthers team, the more they seem to stay the same. We're going to be talking about all those changes coming up on the Atlanta Falcons pregame show presented by Ticketmaster. Of course, Taylor Vismor, Rackley. I've introduced us 15 times now, it seems like. And like I say every week, lots to talk about today.
Yeah, and I know we had some yucky conditions for the Jets game, but this might be the worst that we've seen the entire season. I pulled up the forecast this morning because I heard that the weather was not going to be too kind in Charlotte, North Carolina. You know how you pull up the weather map and you pull up the actual like radar? And all I saw was green going across the entire map. And then it says rain expected until 3 o'clock was as late as my app would go, 3 p.m. It's supposed to be raining the entire course of this game. So it's going to be a wet one. It's going to be sloppy. Some of those old traditionalists, Taylor would say, this is how football is supposed to be played. For me, I'd rather play in sun and dry conditions. But there's going to be some adjustments made to the game plans today because of the weather conditions.
Yeah, I mean, it's close to miserable. It's raining so much there. Like, it's just non-stop rain. Let me ask you this as a former player. Would you rather play in a rain game or a snow game?
Snow game.
All the way.
Snow game.
Really?
Yes. Because the snow is going to fall and it's just going to hit the ground. But the rain comes and the rain just sits and soaks in the football the entire game. This is coming from a guy that was a long snapper, that my grip on the football was extremely important to the success, the performance at my position. So you think about guys like myself, holders, quarterbacks, centers. The grip on the football is vitally important to their success. So yes, I'd rather play in snow. Now granted, I'm talking 25 degrees snow, not like -5 snow. Okay, there's a big difference there.
There you go. That's why Minnesota has a dome. It's too cold up there to be playing outside in the snow all day. But it's week 15. It's been a long time since we've seen this Carolina Panthers team. And something that I love about getting into these teen weeks is talking to the rookies at this point, because they've never seen this many games. They've never played this many games consistently. And they're always like, I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm ready for another bye week. And only in the NFL do you have one bye week for all 17 games. But earlier in the week, Zach Harrison, one of our rookies, sat down with Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree to talk about what it's like to be a rookie and all the things that come with being a rookie and traveling with a lot of veterans. Take a look.
To the fans, man, what's one rookie moment that Calais has done to you, made you grab, made you get food?
I've been nice to him, man. I've been letting him live, man.
Nah, because, bro, the first time I brought wings on the plane, he was like, that was, Saturday, and we had to walk through in the morning. And I'm hearing, like, make sure you get the wings, make sure you get the wings. He's like, make sure you ask everybody what they want. So I'm asking around. Grady don't really want none. David don't want none. Zoe wants some. Zoe, you, and y'all two want some. So I'm like, all right, I'm getting Calais coach. Nah, get 100 wings. I'm like, bro, 100 wings for 3 people? No, I need 100 wings. Well, so I'm like, all right. So I go home, I'm rushing to get the wings. I'm trying to figure out who got wings, and Liam said, it's a wing spot down the street. So I'm like, call them up, I'm like, give me 100 wings. So they give me 100 wings in this giant tray. You remember, this big tray. So I'm lugging my luggage, the tray, my book bag, my other bag. I'm hobbling on the plane with the wings. I walk on the plane, I walk up to Calais, I'm like, bro, heard the wings. He talking about, what am I gonna do with that? you supposed to got here early, had the flight attendant set them up, and brought them to me. I'm like, all right, bro. I put the wings down, grabbed my food, and sat in my seat. I was like, you want wings, you can come back here.
Hey, hold on, man. Real talk, though. Who brings 100 wings in somebody's lap, bro? What am I doing 100 wings in my lap?
That's what you asked for. You asked for 100 wings, so I brought 100 wings.
Okay, honestly, I think I'm on Zach's side. Like, what do you do with 100 wings? What is he supposed to do? How is he supposed to know? Let me ask you this, though. You were a rookie once.
Yep.
Did you have anything like this happen to you?
Every week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Give me a story. Let me know.
Well, I mean, when I was playing, things have changed a little bit, I guess. Now they're asking guys to bring wings, but when we were playing, it was always Popeyes. Like, you had to bring Popeyes, right? So seems like Popeyes would be a whole lot easier to manage when you're dealing with a chicken tender than chicken wings on an airplane. Okay, number one, who wants to smell chicken wings on an airplane? I guess you could probably make the same argument about Popeyes, but it's a little bit more mainstream fried chicken tenders. Number two, what do you do with all the bones when you're on an airplane and you polish off 100 wings? Now, granted, I'm sure they didn't eat the 100 wings. That was kind of one of those Calais veteran tricks that he played on Zach Harrison. But seriously, when you walk on a plane with a platter of 100 wings, I can only imagine all the expressions of the guys that you're walking by, the people from the front office that are on the airplane like, What are they going to do with that
Rookie
tray
move
in the
right
back?
there. It's an
But
ultimate
Calais
rookie
told
move.
him,
Yeah.
bring 100 wings. So you do what
Exactly.
the veterans tell you to do.
And honestly, when you watch him, I've seen him on the Arrivals videos of him carrying these 100 rings. I just can't imagine walking up the stairs with all your luggage and you're trying to hold these 100 wings up. I mean, it's a mess, but he does bring Popeyes still to this day. I mean, he's
So
still a
some
rookie.
things don't change, which is
Some
good.
things don't change.
Now, they were talking about 100 wings for like 3 guys. Like, Taylor, I don't know about you, but I'm waiting for somebody to come in the
I
door
should have
here
brought
and
some
bring
today
us like a
'cause
platter of 50
I can down
wings.
some wings. Like,
Could you
put
imagine us doing this pregame show just sitting here? Well, let me tell you about Desmond Ridder, okay?
It wouldn't be pretty. So we're not going to do it. But like we
Okay,
said,
okay.
things don't change, especially for rookies. And hopefully Zach Harrison will end his Popeyes run in a few weeks. But like we said, things have changed for this Carolina Panthers team a lot since we last saw them. Head coach is no longer there. They have an interim. They've been on the road for 3 weeks now. They lost all 3 of those games. I mean, what do you make of this Carolina Panthers team? Because it's totally different than what we thought they would be in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, when we saw them week 1, you're thinking about, okay, they got a #1 overall pick. They got one of the most successful college quarterbacks that we've seen in recent memory, and Bryce Young coming over from the Alabama Crimson Tide and what he has been able to do throughout his college career. And you're saying, okay, he's going to be the guy that helps revive this offense. Well, that has not been the case, as we know that the Carolina Panthers sit right now at 1-12 on the season. They have a minus 144 point differential. Okay, that means they're getting outscored handedly. There's you see the record that they stand in the NFC South. And they've lost 6 straight games. You mentioned they lost their head coach earlier in the season. Frank Reich doesn't make it through the first season. Things have been a mess in Carolina. I think you could point to a lot of different things. You could say, okay, the team ended up making a lot of moves in order to get Bryce Young, so they didn't necessarily get all of the playmakers around him that they needed to. So they're somewhat still in a rebuilding mode, but they've had issues on the offensive line. They've had issues at the playmaker position, and Bryce Young just has not settled into his groove as the guy that they thought that they were bringing in. Granted, it's his rookie year. But you kind of look at what Bryce Young did even last year when he was at Alabama. You see the column on the left, 3,300 yards passing, 36 touchdown passes, and 5 interceptions. Okay, yeah, we know that the game changes when you go to the National Football League, but his completion percentage has dropped quite a bit, and he has 9 touchdown passes against 9 interceptions, and these are apples-to-apples numbers here through 12 games. So Carolina is not necessarily getting the quarterback, the gunslinger that Bryce Young showed in college. You know, there's been a lot of things said about Desmond Ridder. He's not necessarily been the quarterback that he was in college. There is a process that these guys have to go through, but especially in the offensive side of the ball. If you don't have continuity in the offensive line and you don't have really talented skill position players on the outside to get the football to, and you don't have that balance with a dominant run game with play action and down the field throwing, you're going to have some struggles. So unfortunately for the Carolina Panthers, they're seeing some really big struggles, especially in the offensive side of the ball this year. Not able to score, not able to sustain drives, a lot of 3 and outs, and Bryce Young has just not proven to be that quarterback yet that what they drafted in.
Let me ask you this, because I think this happens a lot with quarterbacks within the National Football League. They come in, they had a great time in college, they had a great resume coming out of college too, and then they come to the NFL and they really struggle that first year a lot. That happens all the time. Why is it so hard to find a quarterback that comes in, maybe like a CJ Stroud, and just goes on a tear and they're automatically great? Why is that such a hard position to fill?
I mean, I would say that it's easy to point to the situations like the CJ Stroud, but there's been a lot of other quarterbacks that have come in that have been highly regarded that have either not played early on in their career. Look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he sat behind Brett Favre when he came into the league. Didn't even really have a chance. And now look where Aaron Rodgers is now. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer when he decides to retire from the game. Trey Lance is another guy that came out as a first-round pick, couldn't even get on the field for the San Francisco 49ers, and now they have a quarterback in Brock Purdy who was a 7th rounder. Quarterback, to me, in the NFL is one of the biggest gambles from a drafting position, that because so many teams decide to mortgage away the future because they feel like this is the guy that's going to change the organization, and then it doesn't happen that way. And then you get a guy like Brock Purdy in San Francisco who gets taken the very last pick in the 7th round, and he is quarterbacking one of the most explosive offenses in the National Football League. How did 31 other teams not see Brock Purdy as well? And how did nobody see him coming out and being what he is in the 7th round? Mr. Irrelevant. So there's not really an easy explanation. And it's going to battle your mental toughness as a young quarterback. Bryce Young is going through it right now.
Yeah.
Desmond Ridder is going through it to some extent as well. Is how much are you going to fight through the adversity the bad times in order to see the good times. Because it wasn't always that way with Peyton Manning. It wasn't always that way with Ben Roethlisberger and Josh Allen and all these other quarterbacks that have had great careers. They had their stumbling blocks. How do you fight through it as a young quarterback? That's what they're trying to find out with Bryce Young.
Yeah, that Brock Purdy, that's what I call the Kyle Shanahan effect. The man just sees it. He just knows it. But let's talk about this Carolina team a little in a broader sense.
Sure.
Because while Bryce Young is struggling and while that offense is struggling, they're 4th in the NFL in total defense. I mean, they have a pretty good defense. But when you look at the stats, when you break it down, how are they 4th in the NFL with total defense? Can you break that down for us?
I mean, they've got a couple really good players on that side of the ball. I mean, you think about the Brian Burns of the world, the Derek Browns. I mean, Derek Brown, interior defensive lineman, is 2nd on their team in tackles with 74. Generally, your interior defensive linemen are not tackling people like that. They're the ones that are eating up blocks and allowing the linebackers to go make plays. Brian Burns has proven to be one of the better pass rushers in the National Football League. He was a guy that you kind of circled when we played him week 1, even though he came off of, 2 or 3 days of practice when we played him back in week 1, because he is a upper level pass rusher. Frankie Louvu, the linebacker, is having a great season as far as tackle, 94 tackles and 4.5 sacks this year. So he's causing some havoc at the second level as well. They've got some good playmakers on the second level on the defensive side of the ball. The difference has been the defense is struggling because of the struggles of the offense, right? You can look at, yes, the total defensive number is pretty good, but the scoring defense number is not very good. The takeaways number, they actually have 9 takeaways this year, Taylor, which is the only team in the NFL that has single-digit takeaways, okay? So they're not taking the football away and creating extra possessions for their offense. So again, the offense, we talked about that. They're struggling, but because of the struggles of the offense, it's starting to affect the defense late in the games. All of the 3 and outs for the Carolina offense is starting to wear the defense out late in the games, right? And then when Carolina gets to the point to where they have to throw all the football time, all the time, that's now putting the defense back out on the field, and then the opposing offense is just going for the jugular because they have the lead in the game. So they can pound away at the defensive line, they can run the football, and now all the rest of the offense opens up for the opposing teams. That's where things are starting to get lopsided. So still really good personnel on the defensive side of the ball. They've shown that they've got the ability to be stingy, but in a 4-quarter game, 60 minutes is where they've been struggling. Yeah,
Brian Burns, we're going to talk about him a little bit later, maybe in this next segment, about if he's going to be playing or not today. But when you look at the defense, I want to break it down a little bit more for you. They are 3rd in the NFL in pass defense. So if you're passing the ball, it's hard. They're stingy.
Yeah.
But they're 22nd in the NFL in rushing defense, meaning it's raining today.
Yes.
How much are we going to see the ball being run, especially by this Falcons
That's
offense?
a great point. And I would imagine all week long, the Atlanta Falcons coaches, the players have been watching that, especially in the offensive side of the ball. They've been watching the run defense for Carolina, and they look ahead. They know what the forecast is going to be for the game. And it kind of plays into the strengths of Atlanta, as you could say right now, is they're a run-first football team. They want to beat you on the offensive line, and they want to use the combination of these 2 running backs in Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, to wear you out with the run game and then have that set up some of the play action and downfield throws. So yes, it's going to set up well for Atlanta because you have to be able to run the football in these conditions. If you get into a game where you're going to have to throw it 30 to 35 times in that weather, chances are you're going to struggle because something is going to happen. The ball's going to slip. You're going to get dropped passes. You're going to get tips at the line of scrimmage that generally turn into interceptions. Yeah. So this is one of those games where for Desmond Ridder and the Falcons offense, if he can throw it less than 20 times in this game, that's probably a good thing. Yeah. That means they're running the football, they're staying on schedule, and they're taking what Carolina gives them, which should be the ability to run the football. So in these conditions, that's why we said when we opened up the show, you're going to have to adjust your game plan a little bit because this is not one of those games where you want to be airing the ball out multiple times.
Well, and they're going to have to adjust their game plan for both teams because of their inactive list and their IRs list. Their injured reserve, they both have changed those lists this week. If we can go ahead and get to the Carolina Panthers inactive list today, Brian Burns was questionable coming into the game today. He will be playing. He's going to be suiting up. But I see over here 2 wide receivers that will be sitting out for the game today. Obviously, we just mentioned how the pass game might not be as big of a deal as their run game is today. But when you look at this inactive team, what are you seeing?
Well, Deshaun Jameis in the corner, he's inactive. And here's what's interesting about this, just Jamison and the entire Carolina Panthers, is they've been dealing with an illness going through the locker room this week. So Deshaun Jamison is inactive, but a number of other players on the Carolina Panthers are dealing with an illness. Now, I'm not going to go into details about that, but if anybody has kind of been paying attention or you have family members, I do. My wife was sick with the flu all this past week. There is something going around the country right now. And just because you play in a National Football League doesn't make you immune to illnesses. I remember many a times that I was dealing with that, having to go into the trainers to get cold medicine to try to battle through it throughout the week, and then having to go out and play in a very physical football game where your conditioning is so important to your success on the field. So, yes, the Carolina Panthers are dealing with it. Atlanta's dealing with it a little bit as well, but not as much as the Panthers. I believe their entire secondary, their defensive back room, was dealing with this illness that was kind of making its way through the room. And it's unfortunate at this time of the year. And then you talk about those conditions, Taylor. Think about that. If you're dealing with a sickness, do you want to go play where the expected high is supposed to be 47 to 48 degrees in a driving rain all day long? Do you think it's going to be hard for them to focus on putting that illness aside? Yes, you want to be a professional. You want to be an NFL player as much as you want. But I can tell you, dealing with an illness while you're playing in the NFL, playing in a game, is extremely difficult.
Yeah, and Hayden Hurst was placed on IR earlier this week, and Justin McCray both on IR this week. So lots of holes to fill, and you're in nasty, mucky weather. If you're sick, I want to be at home. I want to be eating soup. I don't want to be I don't want to be hitting people. Like, that's the last thing I want to do.
Right.
But speaking of Justin McCray, the left guard, starting left guard for the Carolina Panthers, lots of players on the Falcons offensive line are out. They were out last week as well. Drew Dahlman was out. Chris Lindstrom came out last week. Jake Matthews came out last week as well, and Caleb McGarry also was out last week. And you're seeing that happen and flow over into this game today. Caleb McGarry will be out again. David Onyemata did not even make the trip up to Carolina today, but Dupree is out. Chris Lindstrom is out as well. Matt Collins still with that ankle injury. Lots of players that you know these names. You probably even bought a jersey with their last name on the back of it. You know these players. These are huge, huge players to be missing today. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously when you go to the lines of scrimmage, the offensive line, the fact that they're not having two starters in this game is definitely something that's going to hurt, especially, again, going back to what this game plan should turn out to be, which is running the football. I would say the positive behind it, though, is last week they had to deal with the same issue, not only going into the game, but as that game transpired, a bunch of offensive linemen got nicked up, so they had to move guys in and out of the lineup. So what does that do? It gets some experience. It kind of wipes away a little bit of that moment of, oh my gosh, I haven't played much this year. Well, now some of these backups have played. And Arthur Smith talked about the depth that they've built throughout the course of the offseason and leading out through the season is now where you end up benefiting from that depth that you've gotten. So, yes, you never want to go into a game when you don't have two of your offensive line starters, but they've got guys that have played this year in backup roles, so they're going to have to do it again. Flipping to the defensive side, not having David Onyemata definitely hurts. And then, of course, Contavious Street goes on IR this week, a guy that they picked up, and he ended up filling a really important role for Atlanta with the injury to Grady Jarrett earlier this season. But I guess there is a little bit of silver lining that they get Nate Landman back, because I felt like not having Onyemata and Landman in the lineup was hurting Atlanta because they didn't have the middle of their defense strong. Still Onyemata out, Landman back in the lineup, Jeff Okudah back in the lineup helps the defensive side of the ball. But there's not too many teams that you can look at in the National Football League that aren't dealing with stuff like both of these teams are right now as we're into Week 15.
Yeah, two things. First of all, I want to shout out one player, Matthew Bergeron. He was the only player on that offensive line that played the entire game last week. He held it down, held strong, and he's a rookie. The guy is killing it right now. I mean, talk about getting a guy in the second round and him showing up in big moments. That's
I mean, not only did he get the start early in the season, but he has been there the entire year. He's been a fixture at the guard position, gotten off to his career at a great start, and he's kind of been one of those guys that you could depend on. I'm sure he's had his issues. He's had his learning moments just like any other rookie has, but he's been kind of one of those consistent forces on the offensive line. Yeah,
second thing I want to mention on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, last week you saw it against Tampa. Yeah, Baker likes to throw the ball a little bit more, obviously, and so you don't need all those guys up on the line if he's going to air the ball out. So you had Calais basically by himself with like Bud on the other side of him. Why is that, number one? And number two, how do you think they're going to structure this defensive line this week against the running?
So Ryan
Panthers
Nielsen's going to have to get creative on what you do on the defensive line, because they're down with some interior defensive linemen right now. LaCale London, who'd been dealing with an injury, he is back and he got elevated, so he's another guy that they can rotate through there. We know Taquan Graham. Calais Campbell probably going to have to slide in and play some more defensive tackle positions just out of necessity, because they feel confident that he can get the job done. And as we know, he's still a really big body to play that defensive tackle position. But now you're going to probably start to put some more defensive ends in the game, and you're just going to have to hope that they can hold up against the run as well, because we know that guys like Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie aren't the biggest, most stout guys on the defensive end. So a lot of times what teams do is they like to run the football at pass rushers, okay? When you see a guy that's aggressive getting up the field, how do you slow him down? You run the football directly at him. So you're going to have to see guys like Lorenzo Carter and Arnold Ebiketie, with Bud Dupree being out, they're going to have to stand up to the run game because they're going to see it in these conditions. So you got to get creative as a defensive coordinator with your personnel packages. You got to try to keep these guys fresh. And sometimes in the NFL, you got to play a little bit out of position. That's what they ask you to do. Now you got to go in there and you got to succeed. You got to produce.
Yeah, you saw Calais do that a little bit last week as well against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But let's go ahead and get to the keys to the game today, presented by Wells Fargo. It's going to be 4 quarters of rain. So what do we need to do to make sure the Falcons come home with a win?
We just kind of talked about the defensive side, and I'm going to say control the run game. And it's one of those deals where Carolina's starting to feel a little bit of confidence in the running game. They ran for over 200 yards last week. They had like 130-something yards the week before, so they're averaging like 168 yards over the last 2 games on the ground. You're likely going to see a heavy dose of Chuba Hubbard. Obviously, Miles Sanders as well coming over in free agency. He kind of got his feet underneath him a little bit last week in one of his best games since when the Atlanta Falcons played Carolina in week 1. So that's going to be the 1-2 punch for Carolina. They're going to try to establish the run game because throwing the football with Bryce Young has not been very good, and the weather conditions just lend themselves to running the ball. So you're going to have to control the run game. Force Carolina into the situation where Bryce Young has to throw the football, because it's not been a strength for them this year. And even though Adam Thielen's having a really good season as kind of that number 1 option for Bryce Young, it's not been a strength for them this year. So they've got to control the run game. Do not let Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders continue to chew up yards. Because I think, Taylor, if you go back to that game last week against Tampa, especially in the second half, 4th quarter, Tampa was able to run the football. They kind of marched down the field. And again, to me, I think that was a little bit of a function of not having Onyemata and Landman in the middle of the defense. They've got to make sure they shore that up, control the run game, force the Carolina Panthers to throw the football.
Yeah, when you look at the rush defense that the Falcons have, they've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns all season long, and their opponents are averaging 4 yards per carry. That's not a lot, but when you get to the 4th quarter and you've had a lot of 3 and outs like the Carolina Panthers have struggled with this season, they start chipping away at you. Those 4 yards become 8. They become maybe 10. And here's the thing: if you can keep that Falcons offense out on the field longer, then it gives your defense an ability in that nasty weather to be able to keep them at bay at that 4 yards per carry.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the complementary football is what you want. Offense needs to stay on the field. They need to get first downs, let the defense rest, and then when the defense comes out, they play fresh, they play fast, they get 3 and outs, and they force the Carolina offense back off the field again. That's going to be the kind of the recipe for success here for Atlanta.
Yeah, we got a schedule for these guys, and we want them to stay on it. That's our second key to the game. So explain to this one.
Yeah, staying on schedule on offense. And again, all 3 of my keys today, you can tell, are going to kind of relate back to the conditions. But staying on schedule means you can't have those pre-snap penalties that are backing you up 5 yards, setting you back at 1st or 2nd and 15, the tackles for loss or the sacks, obviously. So stay on schedule. How do you do that? You run the football successfully on 1st down. You pick up 3, 4, 5 yards. Keep yourself in 2nd and medium to short situations. If you throw the football, try to find those easy completions. Desmond Ridder has to understand that if they're giving you a 5-yard flat route, and you want to take the shot downfield, take the 5-yard flat route in this game, because if you can stay on schedule, get to 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1. I like my chances with a guy like Tyler Algier to pick up the 1st down. Stay on schedule, stay out of 2nd and long, stay out of 3rd and 12 situations, but a lot of that has to do with pre-snap penalties or even in-play penalties like your holding penalties and you're sitting you behind the chains. This game in particular is going to be so important because you don't want to be sitting back there at 3rd and 14 knowing that you got to throw the football in these conditions.
Yeah, I know. We saw a lot of Drake London last week with 11 attempts and 10 catches for like 172 yards.
Great game.
Something nuts. Is his best game he's had in the NFL, and he said it was like the most fun. I mean, obviously it wasn't the most fun because they didn't win, but he said it was the most fun that he had while on the field, and obviously that game didn't turn out the way that they wanted to, but we might be seeing a big game from Tyler or a big game from Bijan. Even maybe Cordero Patterson could have a big game. He likes the angry runs. He's won that angry run stick a couple of times, so we'll be able to see what they are able to do and hopefully keep that offense on schedule as well. But speaking of the offense and the offensive line, the defensive line, what's your last key?
Yeah, just win the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And because I think that's what this game is going to come down to, is which team is able to win the line of scrimmage. And this is not just offense. This is both sides. So even though we're going to play with a couple of backups in the offensive line, you got to go in and you got to handle the offense. You got to handle the line of scrimmage. Obviously, we talked about the two guys, Derek Brown and Brian Burns. Those are the guys that have to be circled on every single play. You got to make sure they're accounted for, or they're going to cause havoc on your offense and the success that you have because of their ability to make plays. Frankie Louvu as well. I mentioned he's been a tackling machine this year. But flip it over on the defensive side of the ball. Even though we talked about it might look a little bit awkward, if you will, as far as who the defensive tackle's in or what type of formations they're going to be in because of some of the injuries, just win up front. And I would say that's even an extension to the linebackers. Guys like Caden Ellis, Nate Landman, those guys help winning at the line of scrimmage because they're aggressive coming downhill, north and south, stop the run game, force them into situations where they have to win, where they have to throw. If they can win at the line of scrimmage on both sides, they're going to make this game so much more manageable. Shorten the game a little bit, continue to run the football on offense, get them off the field when we're on defense, but that starts with winning at the line of scrimmage. Can't see guys getting into the backfield immediately when we're trying to throw the football. Yeah. That's going to end up being problems for Desmond Ridder. Win up front. Yeah,
so key 2, key 3 kind of coincide with each other because if you can stay on schedule, if you can win up front, you're probably going to stay on schedule. Look, there's a lot of guys for this offensive line and defensive line that are going to get their opportunity to maybe play their first game or maybe start their first game in the NFL. These are big moments for them, and if they can seize the moment, if they can slow the field down a little bit and stay on schedule, they might maybe see more reps throughout the season as we look into the postseason here. The Falcons still have a chance to make the postseason as well. We're not done yet.
Everything is in front of them, but this game, even though there's 3 more after this one, this game is vitally important just because of the state of the Carolina Panthers. You have to win this football game. Even though it's on the road, it's going to be in bad conditions, it's going to be cold and chilly. You got to be able to fight through all that and come away with a victory here. Carolina is reeling. There's a lot of people that are already kind of got their minds thinking about next year. But if the Atlanta Falcons take care of their business, they put themselves right back into the conversation that we need to. Tampa is going on the road. They got to play the Green Bay Packers in this one. You never know what's going to happen over these last 4 weeks of the season. But this has to be a win. Remember, Taylor, when we were sitting here, when the Atlanta Falcons went on the road and they faced the Arizona Cardinals. In a very similar situation. Yeah. Arizona was 1-8 at that time. Okay? Thinking, oh, we should be able to win this game. Well, what happens? Kyler Murray comes back, infuses a little bit of spark into their offense. Atlanta comes home with a loss. Yeah. Can't underestimate anybody in the National Football League, but this has to be a playoff game type attitude for the Atlanta Falcons, like win or you go home. Yeah. Right? And they got to win this game. Got to win this game. And they're going to come back to Atlanta next week and take on the Indianapolis Colts. It's going to be a Christmas Eve game. We'll be here in all of our jolly cheer next week. But in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, not very far away, is a church that means a lot to one of our players and the city of Atlanta as a whole. His name is Micah Abernathy, and he has a family story that is rich and is incredible, not just to the state of Georgia, but to the United States as a whole.
I grew up 10 minutes from here, 10 minutes from what the old Georgia Dome was at the time, and now Mercedes-Benz. I couldn't have imagined it. The people that I might not even have met that just know my family, that I'm running through the tunnel and people are telling me that they admire me because of what my family did. From the time that I was little, my mom has been working. She worked at Turner Broadcasting for 30 so years. I can't remember the exact number, but when she retired from there, she took on another role, and that was the restoration of this church.
Your grandfather came here specifically by request of Martin Luther King Jr. This church became the think tank, the strategic planning facility for anything that was related to the civil rights movement once they moved back to Atlanta. And there's the roofing more roofing. You can see how dirty the stone was as compared to what it looks like today.
I see the hard work that my mom has put into a name that she married into, and I feel like it's what I'm supposed to do, and it's what I want to do. For My Cause, My Cleats, I'm wearing cleats representing my family foundation, the Ralph David Abernathy III Foundation, honoring the Abernathy Center. And I wanted to do this because this is the legacy that my family has built, and I'm now carrying that torch.
I love the athlete. I love the football in him, but the giving and the understanding and the life lessons that individualism has afforded him. It means that the work that was put in paid off, and that work goes beyond him. That work goes back to his grandfather and people before his grandfather who struggled for equal rights to be able to be included and be inclusive in anything that they do.
Oh, your granddad.
I mean, there's some stories that just are bigger than
Yeah.
football, right? And we
Yeah.
got Micah Abernathy from Green Bay this year. And, like, how cool is it that you're coming to Atlanta where your grandfather was a monumental
Yep.
person, not just for the city of Atlanta, not just for Georgia, but for the United States as a whole. I mean, that's incredible.
Quick story. So as I travel around the country doing college games, I remember when I was calling a Tennessee game when he was in school, and I remember seeing the name, and I was like, Abernathy, hold on, is there any relation? And of course, you find out really quickly that there is relation there, and you just think about the power of his family and what he was able to do for this country. And I'll never forget, because I started my career here with the Atlanta Falcons. I was here from 2000, 2005. I made it a point, Taylor, that I was going to go visit the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in the city of Atlanta, just because I knew how important that was to how it changed our country. And to know that Micah Abernathy's grandfather played a vital role in that, walking hand in hand with Martin Luther King Jr. is just awesome. And these are the stories that you love to hear about My Cause, My Cleats, because it's like, wow, you find out about guys that you see him on the football field, great player, but there's more to the player. For him, there's even more power of what's behind him in the family.
Yeah, and what's so cool, that full feature is on YouTube now if you want to watch the rest of that. It's a fantastic story. And what I loved so much about that feature was that his mom talking about how they used to sell it and like watch him at Green Bay and cheer him on. But now when they go to the Baptist church, you can see Mercedes-Benz Stadium from there. How cool is that? And obviously the Falcons
Yep.
will be back there next week.
My
and
baby's
so,
playing right there.
I mean, it's so cool, so cool. And obviously the Falcons will be back at Mercedes-Benz Stadium next week for Christmas Eve against the Indianapolis Colts. But for right now, they have a divisional matchup coming your way against the Carolina Panthers. Thank you guys for watching.